First thing you want to do when you get a contract is read it in its entirety, and then go back and reread it with your highlighter pen. Things you want to focus on: pay when paid, what happens with scope of work change orders, if they have to be written. If you don't have a written form, are you not going to get paid for that? Arbitration versus litigation versus mediation. What's it called for? Is it binding or non-binding? Are you giving up lien rights? Are they asking for a lien waiver in advance? These are all key things you're going to want to look for. There's much more, but start teaching yourself on the major scope of those. Liquidated damages. I don't want to be responsible if somebody else causes the project to be jammed up and tips over the porta potty. I'm not responsible for that. I'm just responsible for what my scope of work was. So you're going to want to really be able to read through those and highlight out, how do we restructure this to where it's fair for both of us? Fair is usually in the eye of whoever wrote the document. Get yourself a highlighter pen and a pen with another color. I like to use pink, but that's just because I like that color. You pick the color of your choice. But you're going to want to go through, and if you don't understand it, highlight it. And ask whoever gave you the contract, whatever company you're working with, they have a person on their end doing the same thing. So when you're going through that, ask them, hey, what do you mean by this? If they can't explain it, and I don't understand it, it doesn't belong there. So you can very simply ask them, hey, if you can't tell me what this means, then it shouldn't be in here, it doesn't make sense, let's get rid of it. Or, hey, we don't do work for pay when pay or pay if paid. We get paid for our supplies or services. And you can walk through those things. You also want to define the payment terms, and you also want to look at scope of work. There's going to be things in the contract you absolutely do not agree with. You're going to want to call those out. First, find out what your company's philosophy on contracts is. Everything goes back to communication, and that's, as we talked about it being our theme, it definitely is. You're going to want to go back and find out how much of a stickler are we. Pay when pay or pay if paid are huge for me. Let's take that one as an example. I highlight that, yeah, this doesn't work for us. We're going to cross this out. The other company may come back and tell you, listen, we don't allow for any changes. Don't mark up our contract. Okay, well, we don't do this. So are we passing on this work? Is there a compromise? Because we expect to get paid. And then let's talk retention. How long are you going to hold this? And then educate yourself on what that looks like. American Subcontractors Association has an excellent tool for that. You can go out and Google it. Just make sure you're looking at the correct dates. Let's chat with John a little bit about this topic. We've been talking a lot about terms and conditions, and we've kind of wove back and forth between what's on a credit application versus what's in a contract, and there's a lot of overlap there. And one of the things that's so critical for a credit manager to understand is, if I'm selling supplies or materials, I need to understand how not only my credit app works, but then how things work for my customer, so for the contractor or the subcontractor, and what their world consists of, which is contracts. So as those two kind of weave together, there are some elements that aren't usually on a credit application, but are on a contract that are, I'd say, offensive to most of us, although if you're writing it, I guess it's your perspective. Pay when pay comes up for me a lot.
Sure.
What are some red flags that you've seen that you absolutely cannot believe that people have signed, and you're looking at them going, you seem intelligent, and then you did this?
Well, I've seen so much in this world that it doesn't surprise me much anymore because I see it so often. But yes, you're right. I mean, many times you've got someone signing a document that says, even though I do the work, even though I've did everything that I've told you I was going to do, I still am not getting paid because you're not getting paid. And there's here in Louisiana, in many states, they have distinctions between pay if paid and pay when paid. And they almost look similar, but they have two very distinct meanings. So you'll see the pay when pay or pay if paid provisions, which hold as a condition precedent that the party above you has to get paid before you get paid. And if they never get paid, you never get paid. That is a rough one. That, if I'm representing a subcontractor or anyone lower, I'm saying you never sign that. You're not going to rely on the credit of the owner. You're relying on the credit of the person that you hired because you don't know the owner.
That's true.
You've only contracted with one party, and I'm relying on you to pay me, not somebody else. Now, there's also pay when paid, which is tough, but in many states, you're going to get paid at some point. So under a pay when paid, which doesn't have this condition precedent that the owner pays the GC for the subcontractor to get paid, even if there's no payment from the owner to the general contractor under a pay when paid, it's still a reasonable amount of time, whatever that means. But you can still sue in court to get paid. So that's a big distinction. So if you're negotiating with someone and they insert a pay if paid, say, well, let's just do it a pay when paid, you can pull out this magic language and then you will get paid within a reasonable amount of time, even if the party above you isn't getting paid. So that's a little tweak that I work with my subcontractors to say, look, they want this, let's work with them, you're going to get paid, it just may not be within the 7 or 14 days that you've requested. But I see it all the time where parties are willing to do work and just acknowledging I may never get paid for this.
So when you say a reasonable amount of time, now there's credit manager reasonable amount of time,
Sure.
which is depending on what I sold you or what the services were, could be anywhere from, like you say, 10 days to 30 days, 60 days. What does the court define as a reasonable amount of time? If I come to you and say, look, this isn't working for me,
Sure.
what's reasonable? What is, that's so subjective.
It is.
Are we sure we want to roll the dice that way? Because that
No,
goes
I'm
against
with
my
you.
credit manager grain.
I'm with you, but I tell you what, I'll take that as opposed to you never get paid. So
Good point.
I think it's just up to that party. Get an attorney who knows what the standards are in that
Okay.
industry. You use your payment application. Say, look, I usually get paid in 30 days. It's been 60. It's way past reasonable, and you make your case. So I think you go to that reasonable standard. Again, it's very vague,
Okay.
but it gives you that right of action to go sue and get payments.
Contract red flags to watch out for. Scope of work, if it changes, if it's ambiguous. Pay if paid or pay when paid. Incorporating a lien waiver into the actual contract. Giving up your lien rights. Any of the shuns, litigation, arbitration, mediation, watch out for those, what they mean, and if it's binding. Indemnity, warranty clauses, what's the scope there? You don't want to be responsible for everybody else on the project. If someone tips over the porta potty, that's not on you. When you're looking at contracts and you're trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes, you can ask for anything in a contract. You can ask for anything at all. Doesn't mean you're going to get it. But if nobody ever challenges you or thinks about it in a different way, it passes muster all the time. It doesn't work for my company or for me. Those are things I'm going to challenge you on. Pay when pay or pay if pay. Whatever you agreed to on your original contract, that's between you and who you're doing business with. That's not our deal. I have no direct relationship or control over that. And that's a really good argument to use with that pay when pay or pay if paid. I'm not part of that relationship. This is my relationship as you and I. This is just a small taste of a much larger class. You can take the full class for free at levelset.com. Join me.